Correct. And you would just stand there like a fool if you made a joke and it didn't work. Do you understand? You are familiar with the sensation. The first superstar on television was Milton Berle. Because to him, TVs were sold out in stores in 1948. Restaurants closed early on Tuesday nights, and crime rates decreased. Every week, 80% of Americans watched him. However, nobody took note when he passed away from cancer. He had been entirely forgotten by the very industry he founded. In a book, his own son called him a monster. He last made news when he groped RuPaul live on television. Uncle Milty, as they called him, passed away by himself without the cheers that had characterized his whole existence. The stage mother who went too far was Sarah Berlinger, who subsequently changed her name to Sandra Berle. She determined her son Milton would live it for her when her parents prevented her from pursuing her ambition of success in show business. When Milton demonstrated a talent for humor as a young child, Sarah gave up everything: her husband, her other children, her entire life, and concentrated only on turning him into a household name. She even changed her name to reflect his notoriety. She would intentionally make loud laughter in order to help Milton win over the audience. In an attempt to get attention, she forced him onto stages without his consent and put himself in danger of being arrested. She had a significant impact on Milton's life, as everyone knew, but at a high cost. Milton was left to bear the burden of her dreams when his father and siblings were disregarded. He claimed later in life that his mother had made the mother of Gypsy Rose Lee resemble Mary Poppins. Milton's early years vanished nearly before they started. When he was only 5 years old, he began performing in silent movies. The Perils of Pauline, released in 1914, was his debut motion picture. Milton worked while other children played in parks. Before turning 8, he starred in over 50 silent films. He starred alongside Mary Pickford and Douglas Fairbanks in Rebecca of Sunnybrook Farm and The Mark of Zorro. A career was exchanged for his youth. Due to his father's illness and inability to work, he supported his entire family as a vaudeville and film veteran by the time he was in his teens. The pressure was tremendous. Milton's experience also demonstrates how Hollywood frequently exploited gifted children at the expense of their pleasure and well-being. Milton's early years took a turn for the worst when he was 12. Later on, he claimed that a chorus girl had robbed him of his virginity. Children were not safe in the VA world. It was full of perilous scenarios, raunchy humor, and late nights. Milton was thrust into this adult world too soon, despite the fact that his mother was constantly close by. It wasn't a single negative encounter. It demonstrated how the entertainment industry failed to safeguard its most promising young performers. Milton said that the experience affected his perspective on relationships for the remainder of his life. Sarah was in charge of more than simply Milton's profession. She also controlled his romantic life. Sarah found a means to break up with a girl if he saw her more than 3 times. He found it difficult to build genuine relationships because of her hold on him. He pursued women in an attempt to show that he wasn't a mama's boy, but he was always dependent on his mother's approval. Milton hardly ever attended school. He attended the New York Professional Children's School, which was established in 1914 for children employed in the entertainment industry. The school allowed him to continue teaching basic skills, but its main goal was to keep children working. Milton was raised in a world of rivalry and celebrity, surrounded by other child stars. Later, he felt isolated from everyday people. He lived in a world of acclaim rather than playgrounds. Joke theft was one of Milton's other claims to fame. A clever joke may sustain a vaudeville artist for years. However, Milton stole content so frequently that he was dubbed the thief of bad gags. Bob Hope once remarked that he enjoyed watching Berle on television to gauge the success of his gags. On air, Berle even ridiculed himself for it. "I'll have more jokes than I can step handle," he declared during a 1947 radio program. The moniker stayed, but rather than harming him, it increased his notoriety. Milton was a popular act in New York by the age of 21 in 1929. He headlined large venues and did 6 gigs a day. In a single run, he performed in 553 shows as the star of the Ziegfeld Follies. He performed on the largest stages of venues such as the Palace Theater. He never stopped working, switching between Broadway, movies, and vaudeville. He became one of the most well-known comedians of his era thanks to his mother's perseverance and his own talent. At the age of 12, Milton made his Broadway debut in Flora in 1920. However, it wasn't a major setback. Acting in movies and even taking first place in a Charlie Chaplin look-alike competition. He had already been employed for 7 years. His mother continued to press him. To draw attention to him, she even flung him into the stage once during an Al Jolson performance. Because of his upbringing, Milton was constantly in need of praise and had to prove himself. Milton stunned audiences by performing comedy and drag during the 1920s and 1930s. It was illegal to wear women's clothing on stage at the time. Nevertheless, Milton did it. He was featured on the cover of Newsweek because of his outrageous Carmen Miranda act. When he appeared on Texaco Theater in 1948, his drag acts were so well liked that everyone was watching him on TV, which caused a drop in crime during the show's run. Long before drag comedy gained popularity, Milton helped make it a component of popular entertainment. Milton's attempts were not all successful. He had a series of unsuccessful radio shows in the 1930s and 1940s. In 1934, he launched his debut show. Then followed Kiss and Makeup in 1946 and Three Ring Time in 1941. None persisted beyond a season. To concentrate on radio, he even declined nightclub jobs that paid $25 a week, but to no avail. He was regarded as the most well-known failure in radio. He required a stage or a screen for his style. Something that occurred on June 8, 1948, permanently altered the entertainment industry. The debut edition of Texaco Star Theater was broadcast by NBC from Studio 6B at Rockefeller Center. It was more than a brand new program. The TV variety format was only getting started. Milton Berle became America's first television star that same night. The program featured live ads, comedy segments, music, and vaudeville performers. It was new, exciting, and enjoyable. Texaco was more than just a show sponsor. They became involved with it. Every show began with a group of Texaco singers and happy staff members dressed as guardian angels. Berle brought tremendous energy to television after already making a name for himself in vaudeville and radio. His rapid jokes, humorous clothes, and slapstick approach quickly got people talking. It was never the same on Tuesday nights. This was more than just amusement. At that point, television really started to permeate American culture. NBC wasn't sure about Berle at first. They experimented with several hosts, including Jack Carter, George Price, and Mae Amsterdam. Berle's initial contract was limited for 4 weeks. Jack Carter even became host in August 1948. However, Berle's crazy comedy and showmanship were unmatched. On September 20, 1948, NBC officially announced it. The permanent host was Berle. He was more than simply a TV face. He was Mr. TV. He became famous because of his quips, outrageous outfits, and ability to connect with the audience. The story was told by the ratings. Up to 80% of the TV viewers watched the show during its height. We can't even fathom that amount in the modern era. His popularity demonstrated that a single celebrity could propel a whole program and an entire sector. People weren't only captivated by Early's magic on screens. It sold more televisions than ever before. Approximately 500,000 television sets were in American homes in 1948. By late 1949, the figure had soared to 2 million. After watching Berle on Tuesday, family hurried to buy TVs, and every Wednesday, retailers ran out of them. It was dubbed the Berle effect. In addition to altering viewing preferences, his program contributed to the growth of the entire television industry. Over 30 million television sets were in American homes by the end of Berle's tenure in 1956. Berle had that type of authority. Uncle Milty was an unexpected nickname. One of Berle's jokes from a 1949 program stuck: "Listen to your Uncle Milty and go to bed." Berle became like family to millions of fans all of a sudden. He was viewed as a member of the family by both parents and children. It was more than a moniker. It demonstrated the power of television to unite people. Earl wasn't merely amusing the country. It was being put together by him. America seemed to pause every Tuesday night for Berle. Movie theaters close at 8:00 p.m. Restaurants closed early. People rushed home. Diners at Lindy's in New York hurried to pay their bills in order to avoid missing the performance. Between 9 and 9:05 p.m., water levels in Detroit City reservoirs decreased. To use the restroom, everyone waited until after the performance. Living rooms weren't the only spaces filled by Texaco Star Theater. It influenced the weekly schedule of the country. Tuesday night became a shared national occasion as a result. Berle was at the top of the globe by 1951. He signed a 30-year, $200,000 per year contract with NBC. Today, that amounts to almost $1.5 million annually. Whether he worked or not was irrelevant. All NBC wanted was to prevent him from leaving. The money continued to flow even as his popularity declined. The pact remains one of the most amazing contracts in TV history, even though the value was reduced when they renegotiated it in 1966. The 19,551 season demonstrated the extent of Berle's show's growth. It had a 61.6 Nielsen rating. This indicates that he was watched weekly in more than 60% of all TV-equipped homes. There isn't another show like it today. Texaco Star Theater was more than just a show back then. It was a nationwide occurrence. It was a must-see TV show because of the vaudeville, guest stars, and Berle's outrageous costumes. By the time he resigned in 1956, TV sales had increased from 500,000 to over 30 million sets, thanks to his ratings. Berle's humor has no bounds. For laughter, he would frequently dress in drag. Here's the unexpected bit, though. Cross-dressing was prohibited in numerous jurisdictions in the 1950s. By making sure everyone knew he wasn't gay, Berle was able to stay out of trouble. He was able to get away with actions that might have led to others being imprisoned because of this double standard. His drag performances weren't merely amusing. They challenged preconceived notions about comedy and gender and pushed limits. Berle stood up for what was right as well. Berle refused to continue when Texaco attempted to stop the appearance of the black dance group the Four Step Brothers. He warned Texaco, just minutes before broadcast, "If they don't go on, I don't go on." Texaco complied. The color barrier for variety shows was broken by the Four Step Brothers' live performance. It was a courageous action that paved the way for black performers across. Milton Berle's life was a whirlwind of tragedy, treachery, love, and fame. In 1941, he married showgirl Joyce Matthews for the first time. It was doomed from the beginning. It was more than just a husband and wife issue. Sarah, Berle's mother, was there. She embodied the quintessential controlling stage mother. Berle even poked fun of herself for making the mother of Gypsy Rose Lee resemble Mary Poppins. Berle felt conflicted. He was unsure of whether to appease his mother or his wife. The drama continued after the marriage ended in 1947. Berle and Matthews made another attempt in 1949. In an attempt to start again, they got married again, but nothing had changed. In 1950, another divorce resulted from the same emotional struggle. The destruction was extensive. Matthews attempted suicide in her married lover, Billy Rose's house following their second breakup. The controversy damaged Berle's reputation. Later on, he acknowledged that his mother's dominance not only destroyed his marriages, but also stoked his desire to have as many affairs as possible to establish his manhood. Whether these affairs were real, they became legendary. According to Berle, he had dated celebrities including Amy Selle Macpherson, Marilyn Monroe, Betty Hutton, and Dorothy Kilgallen. In 1948, the Monroe narrative began on the Ladies of the Chorus set. She was a lady who valued herself, according to Berle, who talked well of her. However, Monroe claimed she didn't even recall being involved with him when they collaborated on Let's Make Love in 1960 years later. It must have been painful. His most ludicrous assertion concerned the well-known evangelist Macpherson. In his book, Berle detailed covert meetings, but McPherson's family and biographers deemed this to be untrue. Whether true or not, these tales depicted a man who was trying to break out from his mother's shadow and demonstrate that he wasn't merely a mama's boy. In 1953, Berle married Ruth Cosgrove after 2 unsuccessful marriages to Matthews. For once, it appeared that Berle had found peace. He was 45, and Ruth was a well-known publicist. Ruth passed away from cancer in 1989 after 36 years of marriage. However, the wounds caused by his mother's dominance never went away. Berle said that even this marriage was plagued by his mother's meddling. He found it difficult to build genuine relationships, constantly seeking female attention, and battling past issues. The reality was more nuanced, despite the fact that he and Ruth appeared steady in public and had adopted a child. His internal conflicts never ceased. Then, everyone was astonished by the secret. Berle and showgirl Junior Standish had a son, Bob Williams, around 1951. Berle claimed to have solely adopted children for decades. Unaware of the facts, Bob grew up seeing Berle at parties. Berle claimed that he kept it a secret out of consideration for Bob's mother. Berle was in his 80s when the truth was revealed in the late 1980s and early 1990s. The harm was done by then. The disclosure further exacerbated the disorder in Berle's personal life and demonstrated once more how his world was created by secrets. Then the fall happened. TV made its way to rural America in the early 1950s. Viewers in small towns didn't find Berle's fast city humor funny. He had 80% of the audience when he was at his best. His show fell to 13th position by 1954-55. Texaco stopped sponsoring. NBC made every effort, but to no avail. The former television tycoon was unable to engage the new national viewership. Domestic sitcoms sealed his doom because his city slicker style didn't work in the heartland. The Honeymooners and I Love Lucy won hearts with their heartwarming family humor. For 4 seasons, I Love Lucy dominated the ratings, hitting over 15 million homes and reaching as high as 67.3, 67.3, 67.3. In 1953-54, Berle's show dropped to 5th place and continued to decline. The American public was no longer interested. Earlier, the fissures had been visible. In 1952-53, Berle's show initially fell from the top spot. After shows by Arthur Godfrey, it dropped to 3rd place. This went beyond just a decline in ratings. An era came to an end. The shifting tide was too strong for Berle's star power to withstand. He fell quickly and viciously. The situation was exacerbated by Berle's contract with NBC. They signed him for 30 years in 1951 for $200,000 a year, which is more than $2 million today. When his fame waned, NBC was trapped whether he worked or not. In 1955, they tried to place him on everything they could and reduced his compensation to $120,000. In order to fulfill the obligation, he ultimately hosted events like Jackpot Bowling. For the network, what was once a great deal turned into a nightmare. Overexposure was the last blow. Berle was everywhere. His voice, his humor, his face. People grew weary of him. What first felt new quickly became stale. His desperate attempts to win back supporters only made matters worse. He was the first celebrity to experience burnout on television. His tumble served as a warning. Even the biggest stars might go overnight in the fast-paced world of television. At the age of 71, Milton Berle, once known as Mr. Television, became the star of what many still consider to be Saturday Night Live's most disastrous episode in 1979. Berle entered Studio 8H with the confidence of someone who had mastered early television and vaudeville. However, he failed to embrace the scathing new SNL style. Racist and homophobic remarks abound throughout his opening monologue. He attacked homosexuals, Arabs, Puerto Ricans, and even made offensive remarks about Dolly Parton's physique. The audience was taken aback. Gilda Arner and John Belushi were among the cast members who watched in horror. It was like repeatedly seeing a comic train disaster in slow motion, according to writer Rosie Schuster. Even for the 1970s, Berle's jokes were rude in addition to being out of date. He obviously had no place on that stage. The catastrophe didn't stop there. Berle sang the song September after the program ended. Then an odd thing occurred. 10 or so of the family members and friends who were seated on the balcony stood up and gave a raucous round of applause. The rest of the audience sat in uncomfortable quiet. It had all been set up by Merle. During a break, he even informed producer Lorne Michaels that the standing ovation was prearranged. Michaels was appalled. He wouldn't allow the balcony to be seen on the cameras. The incident went down in history as a representation of Berle's intense demand for attention and his complete inability to read the room. Berle's destiny with SNL was sealed that evening. He was permanently blacklisted by Lorne Michaels. The first and only host to be banned from the show was Berle. Decades passed before his episode was broadcast again. No one ever crashed and burned like Berle, even when SNL dealt with challenging visitors. The incident acted as a warning when it eventually reappeared in 2003. Regardless of your level of fame, SNL required you to be respectful and flexible. On the list of the worst SNL hosts ever, Berle's name remains at the top. Berle's decline extended beyond SNL. NBC was desperate to utilize him back in 1959. They put him on Philly's Jackpot Bowling after his heyday had fallen. This odd program continued until 1961. Berle interviewed celebrities who bowled for charity and attempted to inject humor into bowling tournaments. But everyone understood why he was there. It was necessary for NBC to burn off his costly contract. A sad chapter for a guy who was once acclaimed as the king of television. The show stopped after 6 months. Berle's haughtiness was intolerable throughout his week on Saturday Night Live. Lorne Michaels later claimed they knew it would be a fiasco from the beginning. He disregarded the writers' ideas, stating, "This might be over your heads." He forced in his old vaudeville routines. He mugged for the camera in ways that felt painfully outdated. Berle's desire to take center stage wrecked the performance. Additionally, it left a lasting lesson about the consequences of a performer who refuses to change. It wasn't just Berle's public shortcomings. William, his adopted son, wrote a harsh memoir titled My Father, Uncle Milty, which was released in 1999. Hollywood was taken aback. Years of emotional neglect were detailed by William. He wrote about a father who was more interested in his work, ladies, and gambling than in his own child. One tale caught our attention. Berle bribed a prostitute to take William's virginity while he was just 16 years old. This was one of the few times his father ever seemed to care, according to William. However, it left him hurt and perplexed. In their strained relationship, another chilly and transactional scene. William continued after that. Before appearances, he explained, Berle would apply a thick layer of makeup. Clinging to a past that was no longer there, he ridiculed his father as a conceited has-been in an attempt to conceal his advanced age. The book finally caused a rift between them. Berle never spoke to his son again because he was so furious. He lived up to that promise until his passing in 2002. The resentment persisted even after death. William made ominous remarks about his father's grave and protested to it. Their relationship was irreparably broken. The unfortunate reality is that Berle's own childhood was linked to his shortcomings as a father. His mom was the quintessential stage mom. She destroyed his personal life and concentrated solely on his profession. If his romances went longer than 3 dates, she even ended them. Growing up, Berle was constantly looking for something he couldn't find and was ravenous for female attention. He was caught in a generation-long cycle of neglect and made the same mistakes with his own children. Milton Berle, formerly known as Mr. Television, was shocked by news in April 2001. As was everyone who still recalled his heyday. He was diagnosed with colon cancer by doctors. Inside him, a tumor had been growing. According to his physicians and wife, it was progressing so slowly that it wouldn't seriously hurt him for another 10 to 12 years. He seemed to have time. It was time to reflect on his life. It might even be time for a final comeback attempt. However, that optimism was a delusion. Berle passed away on March 27, 2002, at the age of 93, less than a year later. His cancer progressed far more quickly than anyone had anticipated. It served as a harsh reminder of the unpredictability of life and death. Without the cheers that had encircled him, the man who had previously kept 80% of America transfixed to their TV sets on Tuesday evenings was now withering, alone. Many people were perplexed by Early's decision. He declined to have surgery. Lorna Adams, his wife, pushed him to think about it, but Berle refused. He took the physician's explanation of the delayed growth seriously. At his age, he believed the procedure was not worth the discomfort and recuperation. His choice was viewed as brave by some. Others interpreted it as surrender. He decided not to battle for more time after years of struggling for attention and chuckles. However, the cancer did not wait 10 years. Within a year, it took his life. Berle's last months were made even more depressing by the way the entertainment industry handled him. His performance was so well liked in the 1940s that stores would close early so that people could see it. Ultimately, however, his decline was little noted by the same business. There were no network calls, no large tributes, and no lavish farewells from up-and-coming comedians who owed their livelihoods to his groundbreaking work. A few old acquaintances attended his funeral. Hollywood silence says it all. The spotlight fades fast, and fame is short-lived. Berle had been in the news for the last time in 1993. At that time, he joined RuPaul at the MTV Video Music Awards. A reference to Berle's previous drag performances, it was meant to be humorous. However, the situation became unpleasant and awkward. Berle's jokes didn't work. RuPaul used the cutting line in retaliation. "You've changed from wearing dresses to diapers." Then, according to reports, Berle went too far. He made remarks that were disrespectful and out of place, and he touched RuPaul's chest without permission. The altercation backstage exacerbated the situation. RuPaul's reputation with MTV suffered as a result of the episode, and Berle appeared to be a man who was out of touch with modern society. Berle was no longer a show star in his latter years. Rather, he received invitations to charity roasts and gatherings where he was made fun of for his advanced age and former glory. As younger comics took aim, Berle would poke or interrupt them throughout their sets in an attempt to regain the attention. Seeing it hurt. Hanging on to recollections of a world that had changed, the king of early television was relegated to the butt of the joke. There was an odd turn of events when Berle passed away on March 27, 2002. On the same day, two more Hollywood icons passed away, filmmaker Billy Wilder and actor Dudley Moore. The burden of these other losses overshadowed the news of Berle's death. Not even his last headline could carry the weight of the guy who once dominated television. It seemed like the end of an era of Hollywood greatness, not just for Berle. The guy he had become was reflected in his funeral on April 2002. The chapel was packed with about 300 friends and celebrities. Don Rickles, Jane Meadows, Red Buttons, Sid Caesar, and Buddy Hackett were there. The service was full with memories, jokes, and laughing. In homage to his well-known fear of getting chilly, his trench coat and cap were used to drape his coffin. Berle was a smile, even in death. However, there is more to Berle's story than a depressing conclusion. He was a giant in the 1940s and 1950s. 4 TV sets out of 5 watched his Texaco Star Theater. Less than 500,000 houses had televisions when he began, but by 1954 over 26 million had. He contributed to television becoming the center of American culture. However, he was forgotten after a few decades. His brazen manner was out of style. He was passed by the very medium he helped create. The old stars were of no use to the new ones. Berle had been forced into the stage by a controlling mother since he was 5 years old. She handled every aspect of his career and broke up with him. It made it difficult for him to lead a typical life. It wasn't until he was 44 that he got married. His later years were characterized by declining fame, health issues, and the heartbreaking realization that the industry did not have a home for its elderly stars. Early said that he no longer gave a damn about making people laugh. All he wanted to do was laugh. His turbulent life offers as a cautionary tale about how fame can both quickly elevate and deflate a person.